I stood frozen in my parents' living room, staring at the empty space in the garage where my Corvette should have been. My heart pounded as my mother's words hit me like a physical blow. Thanks to your car, Abby's healing at her luxury spa retreat. The smugness in her tone made my blood boil, but something inside me snapped. I started laughing. My mother's face contorted in confusion. "Why are you laughing?" she demanded. I pulled out my phone, pulled up Instagram, and turned the screen toward her. Because while you think she's healing, this is what Abby's actually doing with my car money. Her face went pale. Cars have always been my passion. Ever since I was a little girl, my grandfather would take me to car shows, teaching me about engines and horsepower, while my sister Abigail stayed home with our parents. "Rosie," he'd say, "someday you're going to drive something special." The day before he passed away, he showed me a magazine featuring a Corvette Stingray. "That's the one for you," he whispered from his hospital bed. I promised him then that I'd own one someday. For 6 years after that promise, I saved every extra penny. At 32, I was finally established enough in my marketing career to make it happen. I worked overtime, took extra clients, and passed on vacations that my coworkers enjoyed. I lived in a modest apartment when I could have upgraded. Every sacrifice was for that dream, a pearl-white 2020 Corvette Stingray with custom red interior. The day I drove it off the lot was the proudest moment of my life. I felt Grandpa riding shotgun with me, his spirit somehow present in the purr of that perfect engine. My family didn't understand my dedication. They never had. In our household, Abigail had always been the fragile flower that needed constant tending. My parents, Douglas and Eleanor Walker, had created a pattern early on. Rosalind was the strong, independent one who could handle herself, while Abigail needed support, protection, and resources. When Abigail flunked out of college, claiming academic anxiety after spending more time at parties than classes my parents paid for her therapy cruise, when she had her heart broken by a boyfriend who tired of her constant demands, they funded her depression recovery at a mountain resort. When she quit her third job in 2 years, citing chronic fatigue, they converted their home office into a healing space for her, complete with a $2,000 massage chair. Meanwhile, I had been on my own financially since 22. I put myself through college with scholarships and part-time jobs, built my career from entry-level up to senior marketing strategist, and never asked for handouts. Not that they were offered. "You've always been so capable, Rosalind," my mother would say, as if my independence was an excuse to give everything to my sister. I tried to maintain a healthy relationship with my family despite the obvious favoritism. Sunday dinners at their suburban home were a tradition, even though they often devolved into discussions about Abigail's latest crisis. I'd bite my tongue when they'd praise her for the smallest accomplishments, while barely acknowledging my promotions or awards. The weekend before everything fell apart, I had packed an overnight bag for a quick business trip to Atlanta. Our marketing firm was pitching to a major potential client, and as team lead, I needed to present our campaign strategy. It was a huge opportunity. Landing this account would likely mean a substantial bonus and possible promotion to partner. Before leaving, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off some medication for their dog that I'd picked up from the vet. That's when I overheard Abigail crying in the kitchen. "But it wasn't my fault," she sobbed to my mother. "The credit card just kept working and the stores had so many sales." I lingered in the hallway listening as my mother soothed her. "It's okay, sweetheart. Dad and I will figure something out." Later, as I was leaving, my mother pulled me aside. "Your sister's having a rough time. She's dealing with some financial setbacks." I nodded, having heard this story many times before. But what I learned from my father on the way out stunned me. "She pawned your grandmother's wedding ring," he said, quietly avoiding my eyes. "The one that was promised to you." My heart sank. That ring was irreplaceable, a family heirloom with a unique Art Deco setting that I'd admired since childhood. My grandmother had specifically stated in her will that it should go to me. "Dad, that ring was meant for me. How could you let her pawn it?" He shrugged helplessly. She was upset. She said she needed some retail therapy to feel better. "We'll get it back eventually." I walked out that day feeling uneasy, But I had no idea that this incident was just the prelude to a much greater betrayal. My presentation in Atlanta had gone brilliantly. We landed the account a 3-year contract with one of the biggest sporting goods chains in the country. I finished a day earlier than expected and caught an evening flight home, eager to celebrate my success with a long drive in my Corvette. The coastal highway near our city was my favorite stretch of road, especially at sunset. When my rideshare pulled up to my apartment building, I headed straight to the residence garage, where I paid extra for a secure spot for my precious car. As I rounded the corner, I stopped short. The space was empty. My first thought was theft. I frantically called building security, who confirmed no unauthorized access had been recorded. They showed me footage of my parents using a key to access the garage 2 days earlier, followed by someone driving my car away. Not my parents, but a man in a suit. I called my parents repeatedly, but they didn't answer. Panic rising, I contacted my neighbor Hannah, who mentioned seeing my parents with some car dealer guy at the building earlier in the week. "I assumed you knew about it," she said. "They had paperwork and everything." Sick with dread, I went to my mailbox, which I hadn't checked before my trip. There, I found an envelope containing carbon copies of sales documents. Someone had sold my car to Riverdale Luxury Motors for $45,000, $20,000 less than its actual value. Hands shaking, I drove a rental car to my parents' house. They seemed surprised to see me home early, but not particularly concerned about what they'd done. "Where is my car?" I demanded as soon as I walked in. My mother glanced at my father before answering. "We needed to make a quick decision while you were away." "A decision about my car? How did you even get the keys and title?" My father at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We still had the spare key you left with us last year when you went to that conference. And the title. Well, the dealership helped us with that." "You sold my car without my permission," I stated, my voice eerily calm despite the rage building inside me. "That's theft." "Don't be dramatic, Rosalind," my mother replied. "It's a family matter. Abigail needed help urgently." That's when they explained their justification. Abigail had been diagnosed with something called accumulated life stress disorder by some wellness guru named Dr. Palmer. The only treatment was a 6-week stay at an exclusive wellness resort in Sedona, Arizona. The cost, $40,000, not covered by insurance. "We didn't have the money," my father explained. "And we knew you wouldn't mind helping your sister. Family comes first." "Wouldn't mind? Wouldn't mind." My voice rose with each word. That car was my dream. I worked for 6 years to save for it. My mother's face hardened. "Abigail's health is more important than a car, Rosalind. I'm disappointed you can't see that." Something about her sanctimonious tone made me suspicious. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, searching for Abigail's account. Though she rarely accepted my follow requests, her story highlights were public. There it was, a highlight labeled Healing Journey with a spa emoji. I clicked through the images. Abigail in a bikini by an infinity pool, cocktail in hand. Abigail showing off shopping bags from designer stores in Sedona. Abigail getting a hot stone massage with the caption, "Thanks Mom and Dad for making this possible number. Blessed number healing." Not a single image showed anything resembling treatment or therapy. It looked exactly like what it was, a luxury vacation. "This," I said, turning my phone toward them, "is what you stole my car for." My mother barely glanced at the screen. "The resort includes wellness activities as part of the healing. Dr. Palmer says enjoyment is essential to recovery." "Dr. Palmer," I repeated. "And what are his credentials exactly?" My parents exchanged another look. "He's a holistic wellness expert," my father finally said. "He's written books." I laughed bitterly. "So you stole and sold my $45,000 car at a $20,000 loss to fund Abigail's luxury vacation prescribed by some self-help author. Thanks to your car, she's healing," my mother said with a dismissive wave. "That's what matters." That's when I started laughing, a slightly unhinged laugh, born of disbelief and rage. My mother's face contorted in confusion. "Why are you laughing?" she demanded. I pulled up another Instagram post, one that Abigail had been tagged in by the resort's official account. It showed her participating in a retail therapy session at an exclusive boutique. The caption, reading, "Sometimes healing means treating yourself. Our guest Abigail enjoying our partner shopping experience." My mother's face went pale as the reality of what they'd done began to sink in. The Sunday after discovering what happened to my car, I arrived at my parents' house for the traditional family dinner with a folder of printed evidence. My stomach churned with anxiety, but underneath was a steely resolve I'd never felt before. Enough was enough. My sister wasn't back from her retreat yet, but my parents were busy in the kitchen preparing pot roast as if nothing had happened. The normalcy was infuriating. "We need to talk," I said, placing the folder on the dining table. "Can it wait until after dinner?" my mother asked, not looking up from the carrots she was chopping. "The roast is almost ready." "No, it cannot wait." I opened the folder and spread out the contents printouts of Abigail's social media posts, screenshots of the resort's website, highlighting their luxury shopping packages, and a profile of Dr. Theodore Palmer I'd found online. "What's all this?" My father wiped his hands on a kitchen towel and approached the table. "This is what you sold my car for." I pointed to an image of Abigail getting a caviar facial with the resort's mountain view in the background. "And this," I continued, pointing to Dr. Palmer's profile, "is the doctor who diagnosed her. Did you know he lost his chiropractic license in 3 states for fraud before rebranding as a wellness guru?" My mother's knife clattered against the cutting board. "You're just jealous that we're helping Abigail. You've always resented her." "Jealous I've supported myself since college, while you've funded one crisis after another for her. I've never complained about that. But stealing my car crosses a line you can't uncross." My father sat down heavily. "We didn't steal it, Rosalind. We just made a decision as a family. Except, I'm part of this family, and nobody consulted me." "How exactly did you transfer the title without my signature?" The uncomfortable silence that followed told me everything. "You forged my signature." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "That's a crime, Dad." "I just signed your name the way I used to when you were a kid and needed permission slips. I figured you wouldn't mind helping your sister." His voice was small, defensive. "I wouldn't mind if you'd asked. I wouldn't mind if this were a legitimate medical emergency. I wouldn't mind if Abby ever once in her life had to face consequences for her actions." My mother slammed her hand on the counter. "Your sister has special needs. She's sensitive. You've always been the strong one. Abby needs more support." "She needs boundaries," I shot back. "Have you even asked yourself why at 28 she still can't support herself? Why every job, every relationship, every responsibility ends in some dramatic crisis that only money can solve?" The doorbell rang, interrupting our argument. My mother went to answer it, probably grateful for the distraction. A moment later, she returned with Jackson Carter, our longtime family friend and son of my parents' neighbors. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, looking uncomfortable. "I just wanted to drop off that book Eleanor asked to borrow." The tension in the room was palpable, and Jackson clearly sensed he'd walked into something. He placed the book on the side table and turned to leave, but then hesitated. "Is everything okay?" he asked, looking at my tear-streaked face. "No, everything is not okay," I replied. "They sold my car without permission to send Abigail to a luxury spa for her latest breakdown." Jackson's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and then something like resolution. "I think I need to say something," he said quietly. "I've been seeing Abigail for the past 4 months." My parents and I stared at him in shock. "Seeing her? Like dating?" my father asked. Jackson nodded. "She asked me to keep it quiet because she said she was going through some personal stuff. But if you sold Rosalind's car for this trip..." He pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, then handed it to me. "You should see these." They were text messages from Abigail to Jackson, dated just before her departure for Arizona. "I told my parents I'm having another breakdown," one read. "They totally bought it. Dr. P helped me sell it. 6 weeks in Sedona, baby. Wish you could come, but I'll bring you back something nice. Another message included a selfie of Abigail with a middle-aged man with a tan and unnaturally white teeth, captioned "Me and Dr. P, planning my treatment, lol. Parents are paying big dollar for this vacation." I handed the phone to my father, whose hands trembled as he read the messages. My mother refused to look at them. "This doesn't prove anything," she insisted. "Abigail jokes about serious things sometimes. It's her way of coping." Jackson shook his head. "Mrs. Walker, I care about Abby, but she told me explicitly that she was faking this breakdown to get a vacation. She even bragged about how she's never had to work hard because she can always count on you and Mr. Walker to bail her out." My mother collapsed into a chair, still shaking her head in denial. My father stared at the text messages, scrolling through more of them with growing horror on his face. "There's more," Jackson said reluctantly. "She told me she's spent over $15,000 on shopping already, and the retreat just started last week." The room fell silent, except for my mother's quiet sobs. My father finally looked up from the phone, his face ashen. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I really thought she was sick." "She is sick," I replied. "Just not in the way you thought. She needs real help, not spas and shopping sprees." Jackson apologized for being the bearer of bad news and left shortly after, promising to send me copies of the text messages. My parents remained in stunned silence, the Sunday dinner forgotten. I gathered my evidence back into the folder and stood to leave. "What are you going to do?" my father asked, his voice hollow. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But I'm not letting this go." As I walked out, I heard my mother's broken voice behind me. "We were just trying to help her. We always just wanted to help." I turned back one last time. Sometimes helping means saying no. I couldn't go back to my apartment that night. It felt too empty without my car waiting in the garage. Instead, I drove to my best friend Tara's house, the folder of evidence clutched on the passenger seat beside me. Tara opened the door in her pajamas, one look at my face, telling her everything she needed to know. "Wine or whiskey?" she asked, stepping aside to let me in. "Both," I replied. Over drinks, I told her everything: the car, the forged signature, Jackson's revelations about Abigail. "You need to talk to a lawyer," Tara said firmly. "What they did is illegal." "They're my parents," I protested weakly. "Who stole your car?" she reminded me. "Family doesn't get a pass on breaking the law, Rose." The next morning, Tara connected me with her friend Dana, an attorney specializing in fraud cases. Dana agreed to meet me for coffee that afternoon. "Based on what you've told me, you have a solid case for fraud and forgery," Dana explained after hearing my story. "The fact that your father admitted to forging your signature makes it pretty clear-cut." "I don't want to send my parents to jail," I said, rubbing my temples. "I just want my car back." "We can certainly focus on recovering the vehicle or its value," Dana assured me. "But I'm concerned about the bigger picture here. This level of financial manipulation suggests there might be more going on." She was right. With Dana's guidance, I began investigating deeper into my family's finances. What we uncovered was alarming. My parents had remortgaged their home twice in the past 5 years. Their retirement accounts had been steadily depleted through hardship withdrawals. Most concerning of all, there were credit card accounts opened in my name that I had never authorized. "Identity theft," Dana said grimly, showing me the credit reports. 3 cards opened in the last 2 years using your social security number." I felt physically ill. My parents wouldn't. "Probably not your parents," Dana agreed. "Based on the timing and purchase patterns, I'd guess Abigail." The credit cards had racked up over $27,000 in debt, designer clothes, spa treatments, high-end restaurants. The minimum payments were being made, but the balances kept growing. "This explains why my credit score dropped," I murmured. I thought it was because I took on the car loan. While Dana began preparing legal documents to dispute the fraudulent accounts, I continued my investigation into Dr. Theodore Palmer and his wellness empire. What I found was troubling. Palmer had started as a chiropractor in California, but had his license revoked after multiple complaints of inappropriate billing practices. He reinvented himself as a wellness guru, targeting wealthy individuals with vague disorders that conventional medicine didn't recognize. His retreats cost tens of thousands of dollars and promised breakthrough healing through a combination of luxury experiences, superficial therapy sessions, and expensive supplements. More disturbing were the reviews from former clients who claimed Palmer had romantic relationships with vulnerable female patients. Several families had filed complaints alleging that he had systematically isolated their loved ones and drained their finances. I forwarded all this information to Dana, who added it to our growing file. "This guy sounds like a predator," she said. "I wonder if your sister understands what she's involved with." That question haunted me. Despite everything, Abigail was still my sister. Was she Palmer's victim, his accomplice, or something in between? My answer came later that week, when Dana's investigator found social media posts that Palmer had made private. There was Abigail sitting on Palmer's lap at what appeared to be a staff party at the retreat. The caption read, "My favorite patient knows how to keep the doctor happy." "We need to talk to your parents again," Dana advised. "They need to understand the full picture of what's happening." But when I tried to contact them, they wouldn't take my calls. My texts went unanswered. Finally, I received a brief email from my father. "We're working through things as a family. Please respect our privacy during this difficult time." As if I wasn't family. As if I was the outsider who had created the problem. Dana's investigation continued to uncover disturbing information. The car dealership that had purchased my Corvette admitted they knew something was off about the transaction, but proceeded anyway because they got such a good deal. They had already resold the car to a buyer in a neighboring state. "We can still recover the vehicle," Dana assured me. "The sale was fraudulent, so the title transfer isn't valid." Meanwhile, my sister continued posting from her retreat spa treatments, hiking excursions, shopping trips. No sign of any actual therapy or treatment. In several photos, Palmer could be seen in the background watching her. "She doesn't realize she's being used," I told Tara one evening as we scrolled through the latest posts. "Palmer picks vulnerable women with financial resources, or in Abby's case, parents with resources. The question is," Tara replied, "what are you going to do about it?" I made my decision. It was time to file formal charges, not just to get my car back, but to protect my sister and parents from further exploitation. Even if they hated me for it, I couldn't stand by and watch this con man drain what was left of my family's resources. Dana prepared the paperwork charges of fraud and forgery against my parents. For the car sale, identity theft charges against Abigail for the credit cards, and a formal complaint against Palmer and his retreat for fraudulent medical practices. The night before, we planned to file everything. I received a frantic call from my father. "Rosalind, we need your help," he said, his voice trembling. "Palmer just called demanding another $20,000 for Abigail's breakthrough treatment phase." "We don't have it." "We've given him everything." "Everything," I echoed, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. "The second mortgage, our savings. Everything." He paused, then added in a whisper, "He says, if we don't pay, he'll make sure Abby never comes home." I clutched the phone tighter. "Dad, that's extortion. You need to call the police." "We can't." He says Abby's fragile right now. A police intervention could push her over the edge. My father sounded desperate. Could you maybe help with the money? Just this once." The familiar pattern tried to reassert itself. Abigail, in Crisis Family Resources, mobilized Rosalind, expected to step up. But this time, I knew better. "No, Dad, I'm not giving any money, but I am going to help the right way." The next morning, I met Dana at the county courthouse to file our legal paperwork. As we walked up the steps, my phone rang. My mother. "Please don't do this, Rosalind," she begged clearly, having been informed of my plans by my father. "We can work this out as a family." "That's what I'm trying to do," I replied. "This has gone beyond a car. Abigail needs real help, and Palmer needs to be stopped." "You'll destroy this family," she cried. "This family is already being destroyed. I'm trying to save what's left." After filing the necessary documents, Dana and I met with a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit who took my statement about the identity theft and car fraud. He seemed particularly interested in the Palmer angle, mentioning that other complaints had been filed against the wellness guru. "Your sister isn't his first victim," the detective said. "We've been building a case against him for months." By afternoon, a judge had signed off on orders to freeze Palmer's business accounts and issue a warrant for Abigail's return for questioning regarding the credit card fraud. I expected to feel satisfaction, but instead felt only a hollow sadness. This wasn't how family was supposed to work. When I returned to Tara's house that evening, my parents were waiting outside. "We need to talk," my father said. His eyes were red-rimmed, his normally neat appearance disheveled. "Not without my lawyer," I replied, pulling out my phone to call Dana. "Please, Rosalind," my mother pleaded. "Just hear us out." Against my better judgment, I agreed to a conversation with Dana on speakerphone. We sat in Tara's living room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "Abigail's coming home," my father announced. "The retreat called us after the police showed up. They're discharging her tomorrow." "And Palmer. He's claiming doctor-patient confidentiality," my mother said bitterly. "He says Abigail was receiving legitimate treatment." "Which we all know is a lie," I replied. My father nodded slowly. "We've been blind. We wanted to believe she was getting better." "The police detective told me they've been investigating Palmer for months," I said. "Abby isn't his first victim." My mother flinched at the word victim, but didn't argue. "We've scheduled a family intervention when Abigail returns," my father continued. "Pastor Jim has agreed to mediate." Pastor Jim had been our family's spiritual advisor for years. I respected him, but doubted his ability to handle the complexity of this situation. "Abigail needs professional help," I insisted. "A real therapist, not a pastor or a wellness guru." "We know," my father admitted, "but this is a start. Will you be there?" Part of me wanted to refuse to wash my hands of the whole dysfunctional mess. But another part, the part that still remembered building sandcastles with my little sister at the beach, teaching her to ride a bike, helping her with homework, couldn't walk away. "I'll be there," I agreed. "But the legal proceedings continue. What happened wasn't okay, and there need to be consequences." My parents left looking defeated, but somewhat relieved that I'd agreed to the intervention. Dana, still on speakerphone, waited until they were gone before speaking. "You sure about this Rosalind family? Situations can get messy fast." "I'm sure," I replied. "They need to face reality even if it hurts." The intervention was scheduled for Saturday at my parents' house. Pastor Jim arrived early to set up arranging chairs in a circle in the living room. My parents looked exhausted, having picked up Abigail from the airport the previous night. When my sister walked in, I hardly recognized her. The bubbly, carefree woman from the Instagram posts was gone, replaced by someone with hollow eyes and a defensive posture. She glared when she saw me. "So you're the reason they shut down my treatment," she spat. "Always trying to ruin things for me." "Abigail," Pastor Jim said gently, "we're here because we care about you." The intervention began civilly enough, with Pastor Jim establishing ground rules about speaking respectfully and listening without interrupting. But when the topic turned to the credit card fraud, Abigail exploded. "I deserve that money. Do you know how hard my life has been? Rosalind always got everything. The grades, the career, the attention from Grandpa." "Abigail," my father interrupted, "we're not here to compare you to your sister. We're here because we're concerned about your choices." "My choices." "What about your choices?" she shot back. "You're the ones who always bailed me out, who never made me face consequences." It was the first moment of genuine insight I'd heard from my sister in years, though she didn't seem to recognize it as such. Pastor Jim tried to refocus the conversation on healing and forgiveness, but I couldn't let the moment pass. "Abby, you're right," I said, surprising everyone in the room. "Mom and Dad created a pattern that hurt you. They thought they were helping, but they were setting you up for failure by never letting you grow through your mistakes." My sister stared at me, momentarily disarmed by my agreement. But I continued, that doesn't excuse stealing my identity or helping Palmer manipulate our parents into selling my car. I didn't ask them to sell your stupid car, Abigail shouted. That was their idea. My parents exchanged a guilty look. Is that true? I asked them. My father nodded reluctantly. Palmer suggested we needed to show our commitment to Abigail's healing by making a significant financial sacrifice. When we said we'd already spent everything he asked if we had any valuable assets, I mentioned your car was worth a lot. The revelation that Palmer had specifically targeted my car made my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain calm. And the credit cards in my name? I asked Abigail. She had the grace to look ashamed. I found your Social Security number in Mom's filing cabinet. The first time was an emergency. I maxed out my cards and needed to pay rent. After that, it got easier. That's a federal crime, Abby. I know, she whispered. Palmer said you'd never find out if I kept making the minimum payments. My parents looked stricken. Palmer knew about this, my mother asked. Abigail nodded. He helped me figure out how to manage all the accounts. The intervention continued for hours, with painful revelations piling up. My parents admitted they'd been enabling Abigail for years out of guilt, my father for working too much during our childhood. My mother for always finding Abigail more challenging to parent than me. Pastor Jim tried valiantly to guide us toward reconciliation, but the wounds were too deep, the betrayals too significant for simple forgiveness. The breaking point came when my father, trying to find a solution, made a suggestion that left me speechless. Rosalind, you've always been good with money. Could you maybe loan us enough to cover the credit card debt and help get us back on our feet just until we sell the house? Sell the house, I echoed. It's that bad. My mother burst into tears. The business is struggling. We had to take out high-interest loans to cover what we gave to Palmer. My parents owned a small printing company that had been successful enough to support our family comfortably. I'd had no idea they were in financial trouble. How much are we talking about? I asked. About $200,000, my father admitted, including the credit cards and business loans. The room fell silent. I looked at my family, my father's defeated posture, my mother's tear-streaked face, my sister's defiant yet frightened expression. They were waiting for me to rescue them, just as they'd always expected. No, I said finally. I won't loan you the money. But we're family, my mother protested. Yes, we are. And that's why I won't enable this cycle to continue. I stood up, gathering my purse. I'll help you find financial counseling. I'll support Abigail getting real therapy. But I won't throw good money after bad. I left them sitting in that circle, Pastor Jim looking helplessly between us. As I drove away, I wondered if I'd just cut the last ties to my family. The thought brought both grief and an unexpected sense of liberation. 3 days after the failed intervention, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Detective Morris from the Financial Crimes Unit. Miss Walker, we've made progress on your case. The dealership that bought your Corvette has agreed to return it to you after we explain the circumstances. And we've frozen the remaining funds at Palmer's retreat. It was the first good news in weeks. What about Palmer himself? Still building that case, but your sister's testimony could be valuable. Is she willing to cooperate? I hadn't spoken to Abigail since the intervention. I'm not sure. I can try to talk to her. After thanking the detective, I sat, contemplating my next move. Despite everything, I didn't want Abigail to face charges if she was willing to make amends. I decided to reach out one more time. I drove to my parents' house, half expecting them to refuse to see me. Instead, I found my mother alone, sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of financial documents. "Rosalind," she said, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "I didn't expect to see you. I came to talk to Abigail." "Is she here?" My mother shook her head. "She's at a meeting with the bank." "With your father." She gestured helplessly at the papers. "We're trying to figure out how bad it really is." I sat down across from her. Mom, Detective Morris called. "They're building a case against Palmer, and Abby's testimony could help." My mother's hands trembled as she reached for her coffee cup. We've lost so much, Rosalind. Not just money. Everything. Something in her broken tone made me pause. What do you mean, everything? She looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and resignation. Your father hired an accountant to look at our business records. Abigail has been taking money for years. Taking money? You mean stealing from the business? She nodded. Almost $175,000 over the past 3 years. Small amounts at first, then larger withdrawals. She had access to the accounts because she occasionally helped with the bookkeeping. The revelation didn't shock me as much as it should have. It was just one more thread in the tapestry of dysfunction our family had woven. The business won't survive it, my mother continued. We're filing for bankruptcy next week. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, anger at Abigail, pity for my parents, and a strange detached sadness for the family we could have been. I'm sorry, Mom. She looked at me with surprise. You're sorry? After what we did to you? I'm sorry our family turned out this way. I'm sorry Abigail never got the help she actually needed. I'm sorry you and Dad are losing everything. My mother reached across the table and took my hand, the first genuine maternal gesture I'd felt from her in years. We failed both of you, she whispered. Abigail, by giving her too much, by expecting too much. The front door opened, and my father and sister walked in. They froze when they saw me. What are you doing here? Abigail asked, her voice lacking its usual hostility. She looked defeated. Detective Morris called. They're building a case against Palmer, and your testimony could help. My father guided Abigail to a chair. Sit down, Abby. It's time to come clean about everything. For the next 2 hours, Abigail talked. She admitted to the credit card fraud, the business theft, and her relationship with Palmer. She described how he'd targeted her after she attended one of his wellness seminars, convincing her she had special needs that only he could address. He made me feel special, she said quietly. Like my problems weren't my fault. He always had an explanation for why I needed more therapy, more experiences, more stuff. And our parents were his ATM, I added. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. He knew exactly which buttons to push with them. He studied their reactions, figured out their guilt points. It was all calculated. As painful as the conversation was, it felt like the first honest exchange our family had had in decades. No one was making excuses or shifting blame, just acknowledging the harsh reality of where we'd ended up. There's something else you should know, my father said when Abigail finished. He looked directly at me, his expression grave. Your grandfather left you a trust fund. The statement came so out of nowhere that I couldn't immediately process it. What trust fund? Grandpa left me the money for college, which I used. My father shook his head. That was just part of it. He left another account that was supposed to mature when you turned 30. It should have been over $300,000 by now. Should have been, I repeated, my stomach sinking. We used it, my mother admitted, for Abigail's expenses over the years. We always told ourselves we'd replace it before you knew it existed. The betrayal cut deeper than anything that had come before. My grandfather had tried to secure my future, and my parents had stolen that security to fund my sister's manufactured crises. How could you? I whispered. You were always so capable, my father said, echoing the familiar refrain. We knew you'd be fine on your own. Abigail needed the safety net more. So, you stole my inheritance. My voice was flat, emotionless. Technically, we were the trustees, my father said, as if that somehow made it better. But yes, we misused the funds. I'm sorry, Rosalind. We failed you completely. I stood up, needing air, needing distance from these people who claimed to love me while systematically betraying me my entire life. I'll testify against Palmer, Abigail said suddenly. And I'll plead guilty to the credit card fraud. You shouldn't have to pay for my mistakes. It was the first time I'd ever heard my sister take responsibility for anything. Despite everything, I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps she could change. What about the business money? I asked. Gone, my father replied. Most of it went to Palmer or Abigail's spending. What's left won't cover our debts. I walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd grown up. The neat houses, the tidy lawns, all projecting an image of stability that masked the dysfunction within. "I need some time," I said finally. "I can't process all of this at once." As I headed for the door, Abigail called after me. "Rosalind, wait." She approached hesitantly, something clutched in her hand. "I saved this from the resort gift shop I bought it with." "Well, with your car money, I guess?" She held out a small box. Inside was a keychain with a miniature silver Corvette. "It reminded me of you," she said softly. "Even while I was taking from you, I still looked up to you." The small gesture, inadequate as it was, broke something open inside me. I started to cry for the sister I'd never really had, for the parents who had failed us both, for the family we could have been. "I'll help you testify against Palmer," I said when I could speak again. "But after that, I need space to figure out what kind of relationship, if any, I can have with this family." I drove back to Tara's house in silence. The tiny silver Corvette keychain sitting on the passenger seat, a miniature placeholder for the real thing I hoped to recover, and a symbol of the broken trust I wasn't sure could ever be. Repère. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emotional confrontations, and difficult decisions. True to her word, Abigail cooperated fully with the authorities, providing detailed testimony about Palmer's manipulation tactics and fraudulent practices. Her evidence, combined with that of other victims who came forward, led to multiple charges against the wellness guru, including fraud practicing medicine without a license and extortion. My parents faced their own legal consequences. My father pled guilty to forgery charges related to the car sale, receiving probation and community service rather than jail time due to his cooperation and clean prior record. The misuse of my trust fund was harder to address legally, since they had been the designated trustees, but a civil settlement required them to acknowledge the debt and establish a repayment plan, even though we all knew it was largely symbolic given their financial situation. As for my Corvette, the legal process to recover it was lengthy but ultimately successful. The dealership had sold it to a buyer in Colorado who reluctantly returned it once, presented with evidence of the fraudulent sale. When it was finally delivered back to me 4 months after everything began, I ran my hands over the pearl-white paint with a mixture of joy and sadness. My dream car had become entangled with the painful unraveling of my family. The hardest decision I faced was determining what role, if any, my family would play in my life going forward. After much reflection and several sessions with a therapist of my own, I came to a difficult conclusion. I was willing to maintain a relationship with them, but only with strict boundaries and evidence of real change. I drafted a letter outlining my conditions. My parents and Abigail would need to attend both individual and family therapy. Abigail would need to get a job and begin making small but regular payments toward the identity theft damages. And most importantly, there would be complete transparency about all financial matters going forward. "You're being more generous than they deserve," Tara commented when I showed her the letter. Maybe, I acknowledged. But cutting them off completely doesn't feel right either. They're still my family, as dysfunctional as we are. To my surprise, my family agreed to all my conditions. My parents sold their house, using the proceeds to pay down business debts before moving into a small apartment. My father took a job at a local print shop, working for someone else for the first time in 20 years, while my mother found part-time work as a school administrative assistant. Abigail's transformation was the most remarkable. After being diagnosed with legitimate mental health issues, including a shopping addiction and borderline personality disorder, she committed to a structured outpatient treatment program. She found a job as a receptionist at a dental office, opened her own bank account, and began making small but regular payments toward the credit card debt she'd accumulated in my name. Our family therapy sessions were painful but productive. Under the guidance of a skilled therapist, we unpacked decades of unhealthy patterns. My parents acknowledged how their different treatment of Abigail and me had damaged us both, her through enabling me through emotional neglect disguised as confidence in my independence. We thought we were doing what was best, my father admitted during one particularly difficult session. But we were actually making choices based on what was easiest for us. Abigail's dramatic needs were louder, so they got more attention. And Rosalind never complained, my mother added. We told ourselves that meant she was fine. I wasn't fine, I said quietly. I just knew complaining wouldn't change anything. Slowly, painfully, we began building something new from the ashes of our old family dynamic. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks and arguments, moments of distrust, and flashes of old patterns. But there was also a new honesty between us, a willingness to acknowledge hurt, rather than bury it beneath platitudes about family loyalty. 1 year after the day I discovered my car missing, I received a text from Abigail asking if we could meet. We'd been in family therapy together, but had rarely spoken one-on-one outside those sessions. We met at a coffee shop near her apartment, a modest place she now shared with a roommate, paying her own rent for the first time in her adult life. I have something for you, she said, after we'd ordered our drinks. She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $4,000, a fraction of what she owed me, but more than I'd expected to see. My bonus from work, she explained. I've been there 6 months without missing a day or being late. My boss said it was the most reliable employee he's ever had. The pride in her voice was palpable. For perhaps the first time in her life, she was experiencing the satisfaction of earning something through consistent effort rather than manipulation. That's amazing, Abby. But don't you want to use this for yourself? Maybe get a better apartment? She shook her head. I need to make this right more than I need a nicer place to live. Besides, she added with a small smile, my therapist says delayed gratification is good for me. We talked for nearly 3 hours. Really talked, as adults, rather than as the roles we'd been assigned in our family, the responsible one and the troubled one. She told me about her ongoing therapy, the coping strategies. She was learning her small but growing circle of genuine friends rather than enablers. I've been defining myself by my problems for so long, she said. It's strange to start defining myself by my strengths instead. As our conversation wound down, an idea occurred to me. What are you doing this weekend? I asked. Nothing special. Why? I thought maybe we could take a drive up the coast. In the Corvette. Her eyes widened. You'd let me ride in it after everything. Passenger seat only, I clarified with a small smile. But yes, it's time. That Saturday we drove north along the coastal highway, the Corvette's engine purring as we wound through scenic curves with the windows down. We didn't talk much, just enjoyed the drive and each other's company, without the weight of expectations or past roles. At a scenic overlook, we stopped to watch the sunset over the ocean. Standing beside the car that had become both the symbol of our family's dysfunction and, strangely, the catalyst for its healing, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I never thanked you, Abigail said suddenly. For what? For not giving up on me. For being willing to blow everything up instead of enabling me like everyone else. She leaned against the car's hood, her eyes on the horizon. It hurt like hell at the time, but it probably saved my life. I thought about the past year, the pain, the legal battles, the difficult conversations, the slow rebuilding of trust. I almost gave up, I admitted. There were moments I wanted to walk away completely. Why didn't you? The question made me pause. Why hadn't I cut ties with my family after such profound betrayal? The answer came to me slowly, like the waves rolling onto the shore below us. Because family isn't just about what's easy or comfortable. Sometimes it's about making the hard choice because you care enough to want better for each other. I turned to face her. You needed someone to believe you could be more than your problems. And you needed someone to see that your strength wasn't an excuse to take you for granted, she replied. We drove back as darkness fell, the Corvette's headlights cutting through the night. Our family wasn't perfect, far from it. My parents were still struggling financially and working to rebuild their lives. Abigail's recovery would be a lifelong journey with potential setbacks, and I was still learning to establish healthy boundaries while allowing myself to be vulnerable. But as we cruised down the highway, the car that had once been stolen from me now carrying us forward together, I realized that sometimes the things that break us open are the same things that allow us to heal into something stronger, more authentic, and more compassionate than before. "Do you think we'll ever be a normal family?" Abigail asked as we neared the city. I laughed softly. "I don't think normal is the goal. Healthy is what matters. And we're getting there one day at a time." The truth is, family healing rarely comes from grand gestures or miraculous transformations. It comes from the daily choice to face reality with honesty, to hold each other accountable with compassion, and to believe in the possibility of growth, even when evidence is slow to appear. It comes from recognizing that true love isn't about enabling harmful patterns or accepting betrayal. It's about wanting the best for each other, even when that means making difficult choices. My car, once the symbol of my independence and achievement, had become something more a reminder that sometimes we have to lose something valuable to gain something priceless. The truth that sets us free to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than convenience or habit. As we pulled into my apartment complex, I realized that while the journey had been painful, I wouldn't trade the honest, imperfect family we were becoming for the false harmony we'd maintained before. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to be used anymore, not out of spite, but out of belief that everyone deserves the dignity of facing their own choices and the opportunity to grow through their consequences. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love? What did you learn from that experience? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself can sometimes be the most loving choice you can make. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage and clarity in your own.